The fog rolled in thick and heavy over the Thames, curling like pale fingers around the arches of Marlow Bridge. Clara then tightened her coat, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the mist. The locals had warned her that Marlow slept early, especially when the fog came down. But tonight, the air was alive with something, an echo beneath the bridge that did not belong to wind or water. She was there on assignment, sent by the London Gazette to uncover the truth behind the town's oldest legend, the ghostly woman said to appear whenever the river swallowed the moonlight. Clara had always dismissed such stories, but as she reached the bridge, the soft clang of a distant bell made her pause. It came again, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat echoing through water. A figure emerged at the far end of the bridge. It was an elderly man, tall and thin, holding a lantern that swung with each step. His face was lined by age and solitude, his grey eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. "You must be Miss Venn," he said, his voice carrying oddly clear through the fog. "Arthur Penrose. I keep the bridge." Clara hesitated. "You live here?" "Aye. Someone must keep the river from taking what it shouldn't." His words lingered, strange and unsettling. She followed him across the bridge to a small stone cottage by the water's edge. Inside, the air smelled of oil and damp wood. Paintings covered every wall, each one depicting the same woman. Her eyes, soft and haunting, seemed almost alive. Clara leaned closer to one canvas. The brushstrokes were delicate, almost tender, yet there was something chilling about the expression, a mix of sorrow and longing. "Who is she?" Clara asked. Arthur's gaze darkened. "She's the reason the river remembers." A sudden gust rattled the window panes. Outside, the fog thickened, and from somewhere beneath the bridge came that sound again, the bell tolling softly, as if calling someone home. Arthur slowly turned towards the window, his lantern flickering. "Best not to listen when the river speaks, Miss Venn. It doesn't always speak to the living." And just then, Clara thought she saw it too, beyond the mist, by the black water, a woman's silhouette standing on the bridge, her dress billowing as though the night itself breathed through her. The lantern's flame trembled. The bell tolled once more. And when Clara looked back, the figure had vanished. The following morning, the fog had lifted, leaving behind a thin veil of mist that hovered above the river. The village of Marlow seemed harmless under the pale sunlight, children cycling along the cobbled lanes, the smell of bread drifting from the bakery near the square. Yet Clara could not shake the unease that had settled inside her since the night before. Arthur Penrose had been gone when she awoke, leaving only a pot of tea and a short note by the window. "The bridge keeps its secrets. Tread lightly." She took her notebook and camera, determined to explore the cottage more closely. The interior looked as though time had stopped. Every corner was lined with paintings, the same woman again and again. In one, she stood beside the river, in another, she stared through a rain-streaked window. Yet each portrait felt subtly different, as though capturing moments of a life lived in shadow. A creak came from beneath the floorboards. Clara followed the sound to a small door half hidden behind an old wardrobe. When she tugged it open, a damp, musty smell rushed out. Stairs led down into darkness. She hesitated. Then curiosity won. The cellar was cold, the air thick with mildew and turpentine. A single bulb flickered weakly from the ceiling. And there, lined neatly along the stone walls, were dozens more paintings, all unsigned. But these were not merely portraits. They were scenes, haunting, detailed, alive. In one painting, a woman stood on the bridge at night, her face pale with terror as water rose around her ankles. In another, Arthur himself appeared, holding a lantern as he reached toward her. And in the final painting, the woman's hand was pressed against the glass, as though begging to be freed from within the canvas. Clara's breath caught. Something shifted in the shadows. She turned sharply. Nothing. Only the soft dripping of water from the ceiling. She exhaled shakily and lifted her camera to take a photo, but the moment she pressed the shutter, the bulb above her burst, plunging the cellar into darkness. The flash from the camera briefly lit the room, and for an instant, she saw it. A reflection on one of the canvases. Not hers. It was the woman from the paintings. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her lips moved as though whispering Clara's name. The camera slipped from Clara's grasp, shattering on the floor. She stumbled backward, her heart hammering. And then she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, descending the stairs above her. "Arthur," she called out, her voice trembling. The steps stopped halfway down. A silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a lantern that flickered weakly. But when the light fell across the figure's face, it was not Arthur Penrose. The figure descended slowly, the lantern's glow trembling against the stone walls. Clara held her breath, her pulse hammering in her throat. As the light drew nearer, the shape became clearer, a woman in a long, faded dress, her hair damp as though she had just come from the river. Her eyes found Clara in the darkness. They were the same eyes from the paintings, soft, mournful, yet filled with something human and pleading. "Who are you?" Clara whispered. The woman didn't answer. She reached out a trembling hand, her voice faint as the air around them thickened. "He promised, he said he would let me go." Clara stumbled back, heart racing. "Who promised you?" But before the woman could speak, the sound of the front door upstairs slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed overhead, followed by Arthur's deep voice calling her name. "Miss Venn. Are you down there?" When Clara turned back, the lantern light flickered, and the woman was gone. Only the paintings stared back at her. Arthur appeared at the top of the stairs, his face pale and glistening with sweat. "You should not be down here," he said sharply. "It's not safe." Clara swallowed hard. "Arthur, who is she?" "The woman in your paintings." "I saw her." Arthur froze, gripping the railing. His voice dropped to a low whisper. "You mustn't speak to her. She doesn't belong here anymore." "Anymore?" Clara stepped closer. "She said you promised to let her go." Arthur's expression hardened. He turned away, muttering almost to himself. "She was lost to the river, a long time ago. But some things the water won't keep. It sends them back." He lifted the lantern, motioning her to follow. "Come. You've seen enough." As they climbed back up, Clara glanced over her shoulder one last time. The cellar seemed to pulse faintly, as if the air itself were alive. On the nearest painting, something had changed, the woman's expression. Her eyes were now turned toward the stairs, watching Clara leave. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The moon hung low over the river, silvering the ripples. Every few minutes, she heard faint footsteps outside the window, followed by the sound of dripping water. At last, she rose and pulled back the curtain. Standing at the edge of the bridge was the same woman, her dress trailing behind her like mist, her face pale beneath the moonlight. She raised a hand slowly, pointing towards the water below. And beneath the bridge, something glimmered, something metallic, catching the moonlight, as though waiting to be found. At dawn, the mist still clung to the banks of the Thames. Clara dressed quickly, her mind replaying the vision from the night before, the woman on the bridge, the glimmer beneath the water. She could no longer dismiss it as imagination. Something was down there. She took Arthur's old lantern and made her way to the river's edge. The water was calm, deceptively so, like glass hiding its own secrets. She stepped carefully along the stones, searching for the spot where the light had flickered. Her foot caught on something half buried in the mud, a small chain, rusted but still intact. As she pulled it free, the silk parted, revealing a metal locket shaped like a teardrop. Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a faded photograph of the same woman from the paintings, smiling faintly, and beside her, a young man, Arthur Penrose. Clara's breath caught. A sudden noise behind her made her turn. Arthur stood by the willow trees, his face unreadable. "I told you not to come here," he said quietly. Clara held out the locket. "You lied to me. You knew her." Arthur's eyes flickered, haunted. "I did. Once. But she's gone." "Gone?" "She's here, Arthur. I saw her. She's trying to tell me something." He stepped forward, his voice trembling. "You don't understand what the river does, Miss Venn. It remembers everything. It keeps the voices of those who drowned, until someone listens long enough to let them speak again." The wind picked up, rippling the surface of the Thames. Clara looked at the locket again, noticing something carved faintly along its edge, initials. AP and EW. "EW," she murmured. "Who was she?" Arthur's shoulders slumped. "Eleanor Ward. She lived here before the war. I painted her, loved her, but she wanted to leave Marlow. I couldn't let her go. We argued by the bridge that night." His voice broke. "She slipped. The river took her. I tried to save her, but..." He stopped, closing his eyes. "Every year when the fog comes, she returns. To remind me what I've done." Clara felt the cold seep through her bones. "Then why me, Arthur? Why is she reaching for me?" He stared at her for a long moment, the morning light glinting in his eyes. "Because you look exactly like her. The river sent you." Before Clara could respond, a low rumble shivered through the ground. The river stirred, waves lapping violently against the stones. The air grew icy, the lantern flickering. And then, from the middle of the water, a hand broke through the surface, pale, dripping, reaching toward them. Arthur stumbled backward, horror etched across his face. The voice that followed was unmistakable. It was not the wind. It was a woman's whisper, rising from the river itself. "Arthur, you promised." The night of the festival arrived with a strange stillness in the air. The people of the village gathered in the square, dressed in old garments, carrying lanterns that flickered like trapped souls. The smell of smoke, cider, and damp earth mixed together, creating an eerie perfume that lingered in the throat. Eliza followed Aidan through the crowd, their hands brushing occasionally. Her heart beat faster, not from the cold, but from the heavy pull of something she could not name. When they reached the center of Penhaligon Fields, the old stones stood tall like sentinels. In the middle was a large fire pit, unlit, surrounded by bundles of herbs and ribbons tied in the shape of circles. "Stay close to me," Aidan whispered. "No matter what happens." The villagers began to hum, a low chant that rose and fell like waves. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face painted with ash and crimson. "The blood moon rises, and so does she," she said. Eliza's pulse quickened. "Who is she?" she asked in a whisper. "The keeper of the hollow," Aidan replied softly. "The spirit that binds our past and future. The one who took you, once before." Before Eliza could speak, the crowd fell silent. Over the distant hills, the moon began to rise, large, red, and luminous, bathing the fields in a blood-hued glow. The villagers bowed their heads. The woman lifted her hands, chanting words older than memory. The fire roared to life in a sudden burst of heat, its flames burning a deep scarlet. And then, in the reflection of the firelight, Eliza saw her shadow move before she did. It turned its head, smiled, and whispered, in her own voice, "You came back." Eliza stumbled backward, but Aidan caught her. His grip was firm, his face pale. "You see it now," he said. "The hollow remembers. It never forgets its own." Her reflection continued to move, lips curving into a haunting grin. The air shimmered between them like heat rising from stone. Then, without warning, her shadow stepped out of the ground. The crowd gasped. The woman's chant grew louder. The two Elizas stood facing each other, the living and the lost. I don't understand, Eliza cried. Who are you? Her double smiled. I am what you left behind. The wind rose suddenly, tearing through the field. Lanterns blew out. The fire flared so bright it painted the entire hollow in crimson light. And in that instant, Eliza felt the ground beneath her open. A voice echoed through the field, calling her name. Not once, but thrice. She looked at Aidan, his eyes full of terror, and realized the truth she had been running from since she first arrived. She had been here before. And she never truly left. The air inside Penhaligon Fields trembled like a held breath. The villagers stood frozen, their faces ghostly in the blood moon's light. Only the two Elizas moved, mirrors of each other, one warm with life, the other pale as frost. Do you remember what you promised? The other Eliza asked softly, her voice echoing as if spoken from a cavern. Eliza shook her head. I never made any promise. Her double tilted her head. You did. Long ago, when the river drowned the orchard. You asked to be spared. And I took your place beneath the water. A chill spread through Eliza's chest. Memories, half-dreams, began to stir, the cold rush of water, the weight of arms dragging her down, and a voice whispering, live, and remember me. She turned to Aidan. Is this true? His expression was torn between fear and sorrow. The stories speak of twins born a century apart. One who lives, one who guards. I thought it was only a myth. It was never a myth, the other Eliza said, stepping closer. Her eyes gleamed with unnatural light. The hollow keeps balance. One must stay, the other may walk free. It is your turn to return. The villagers began to chant again, faster now, desperate. The ground pulsed with a red glow, and from the circle of stones, thin roots of light snaked toward Eliza's feet. Aidan grabbed her hand. Fight it! I can't, she gasped. The pull beneath her grew stronger, as though the earth itself wanted her back. Aidan, what happens if I stay? His hand trembled. Then she takes your life, and you become the keeper. The other Eliza smiled gently. It is not death. It is memory. I waited 100 years. Now it is you who must remember. Eliza felt her strength falter. The air around her shimmered, filled with whispers, voices of those lost to the hollow, calling her name with soft reverence. Then, through the chaos, Aidan stepped into the circle. Take me instead, he said. The crowd gasped. The red light flared. The keeper turned her gaze toward him. You cannot take her burden. I can, he said firmly, his voice breaking. I owe her my life. You know this place takes what it's owed. Eliza screamed as the roots of light reached for him, wrapping around his legs, his arms, his chest. The air crackled. The keeper's eyes widened, and for the first time, Eliza saw something like fear. No, the keeper hissed. He is not bound by the bloodline. But it was too late. The fire roared higher, swallowing them in crimson light. Eliza reached for Aidan, their fingers brushing as the world dissolved into a blinding glow. Then, silence. When the light faded, the villagers had vanished. The moon hung white and cold again. Eliza stood alone in the circle, the air thick with ash. At her feet lay a single pendant, a small silver locket, its surface engraved with an unfamiliar name. She opened it. Inside was a tiny sketch of herself, drawn in ink faded by time. And in the reflection of the locket's glass, a voice whispered softly, "Remember me." The morning after was eerily still. The mist had lifted, revealing Hawthorne Hollow bathed in pale sunlight for the first time in years. The church bells were silent, and the air smelled faintly of burnt earth and river water. Eliza awoke near the edge of the circle, her head resting on soft moss. For a moment, she thought she had dreamt it all, the chanting, the light, the sacrifice. But the locket in her hand was warm against her skin, pulsing faintly, as if something within it still breathed. She rose to her feet. The stones that had once glowed red were now cracked and dull. Aidan was gone. The villagers were gone. Only silence remained. Slowly, she walked back to the bridge. The river shimmered quietly beneath her, calm and silver like a mirror. For the first time, there was no reflection staring back, no shadow twin, no ghostly shape waiting beneath the arches. Only her. But as she leaned over the railing, she noticed something carved into the stone, fresh, as if etched that very night. Penrose, the keeper. Her throat tightened. The locket began to hum softly, and when she opened it, the sketch inside had changed. No longer her face, but Aidan's. His eyes seemed alive, watching her. A whisper followed, carried on the breeze. The Hollow remembers. Eliza turned sharply, her gaze sweeping across the fields. In the distance, the Penhaligon cottage still stood, but something was different. Smoke rose from the chimney. The windows glowed faintly, as though someone was home. Drawn by an unseen force, she walked back through the winding path until she reached the gate. The door was slightly open. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and river mist. A figure stood by the fireplace. He was turned away, tending to the flames. "Aidan," she breathed. The man turned slowly. It was him, but not as she remembered. His eyes glimmered with a calm, otherworldly light, and his skin carried a faint glow, like moonlight filtered through water. "I told you," he said softly. "The Hollow takes what it's owed. But it also gives back what it must keep." Tears filled her eyes. "You're the keeper now." He smiled faintly. "Someone must be." Outside, the wind stirred the river again. Through the window, Eliza saw the fog beginning to rise once more, curling over the bridge like an old memory returning. She clutched the locket to her chest. "Will I see you again?" Aidan stepped closer, placing a hand over hers. His touch was cool, but real. "Every time the river breathes. Every time you remember." Then, as the first bell of dusk tolled across the valley, his form began to fade, dissolving into pale light, like mist returning to the water. Eliza stood there long after he vanished, the house quiet but no longer empty. She walked outside, where the river moved with a slow, steady rhythm, as if exhaling peace. In the reflection of the bridge, she saw only her own face, no twin, no ghost, just herself. But when she turned to leave, she noticed something at the water's edge. A single lantern, still burning, its flame unwavering despite the wind. She knelt and whispered into the mist, "Thank you." The flame flickered once, like an answer, before finally going out. And from that day on, the people of Marlow swore the fog over the Thames had changed. It no longer whispered sorrow, but a song, soft and steady, of love that refused to sink beneath the river.